A good deal better than it has been, but there could be some cloud in places. Your high today, 15 degrees Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
I don't know why I bother coming in here sometimes. I own 2 banks now. Don't see why I have to come in here. I know. Well, you do as well, I realise that. Yeah, but we do. We own 2 banks. Well, 3 if you count the Bank of England, but that's not really a bank, is it? You know, and you could include all them Toy Town banks in Scotland and the Bank of Northern Ireland, the Ulster Bank. We own all them, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, we will soon, the way this government's going, man. Bloody hell, we'll own them all. Yeah, I own 2 banks, Bradford and Bingley, and I've done well out of them. I got about £1,000 out of them because of Thatcher. Fine woman, got nothing wrong all her life. Yeah, I got about £1,000 out of them. Northern Rock, I made a few bob out of them as well. I used to do their voiceovers in the adverts, so that was a few bob. And because of that, I had to have money in it, so when they went, that was okay. I got more off them than I had in. That was brilliant, that. I had about 60 quid in it. And they demutualised, and I got about 700 notes, if I remember correctly. Brilliant. So Thatcher privatised all the building societies, or freed up all the building societies, and now the government's buying them, keeping the crap, and selling the good stuff on. It's extraordinary. Isn't it? Absolutely extraordinary. I've been saying for years that the demutualisation of the building societies, despite the fact, as I say, that I made a few bob out of it, like everyone else, or lots of others, I said it was a bad idea at the time, but I wasn't going to turn the money down. I'm not completely stupid, unlike Thatcher, who clearly was. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. The newspapers have finally caught up with Beswick. They've done awfully well. It's only the Metro so far, it's not the big ones, but I bet the FT will be quoting me before the year is out. The failure of Bradford and Bingley is the final nail in the coffin of one of Margaret Thatcher's most widely felt financial reforms. Its imminent nationalisation, well, they wrote this yesterday, its imminent nationalisation marks the end of the line for demutualised building societies, all of which have now been taken over or gone bust. Talking to a lad this morning, his shares in Bradford and Bingley, which he was issued with when it demutualised, at one point went as valuable as £6,000. Now, it's not worth the match to set fire to them. Yeah, that's true. You see, if you've got money in the Bradford and Bingley, and by that I mean if you're a depositor, you've got your mortgage with them, and we'll come to that in a moment, but if you've got your money in Bradford and Bingley in an ISA or whatever, your money is now more secure than it was well, no, because they've sold that off, but your money's secure, don't worry. Don't worry. Santander, Bradford, Bingley and Barcelona, as they're now called, the Bradford, Bingley and Barcelona Bank, because Santander have bought them, a Spanish company. Just like a Spanish company owns our airports, apart from the ones that Manchester owns, but a Spanish company owns all the airports, and a Spanish company will very shortly own all the banks. Them were the days. Come back, King Philip, Elizabeth forgives you. Never mind, it was a historical joke, don't worry. But that's what's going on. Anyway, but if you were a depositor with Bradford and Bingley, your money's fine. It's as safe as it is in any other financial institution called a bank. If, however, you're a shareholder in Bradford and Bingley, you're stuffed. You're completely and utterly stuffed. Your shares, as I say, they are not worth the match to set fire to them. And whose fault is that? Well, frankly, ours, yours, mine, everybody's. The banks are falling to bits at the seams at the moment because of the greed of multi-millionaire speculators. But the reason the building societies are falling to bits at the seams is because you and me thought we could get free money. You and me thought that we could actually sell something that we didn't own and get money from it. Now, the Tories are not the only people to make a balls of this. The Labour Party had a bash at it when they stole Lloyd's TSB. Yes, that's the word I used. They stole the TSB, the Trustee Savings Bank, which began in Scotland and was for many, many years a mutual, but they then sort of did nothing to emphasise their mutuality. And the government eventually sold the Trustee Savings Bank to the directors of Trustee Savings Bank for £1 billion, I think the figure was, many, many years ago, and they turned it into a trading bank. So it became a bank rather than a savings bank. And the £1 billion didn't, on that occasion, go to the owners of the Trustee Savings Bank, which was all the people who had money in it. It didn't go to them. No, the government kept it. They stole it. They stole it by a perverse interpretation of the banking and banks regulations. So it's not unheard of. It's not the first time it's happened. It won't be the last time it's happened. But yours and my greed as what's cost us what it's costing us now. But there you are. What can I say other than I told you so, but nonetheless took the money when it was offered. What do you think about it? What do you think of Thatcher now? The one thing the Tories were supposed to be in the 80s were the people who understood finance. Well, all the building societies that demutualised as a result of the regulation change brought in by Thatcher and her cronies in the cabinet are now owned by banks or have gone bust. She hadn't a clue. She had not a clue. We're now paying through the snout for oil and gas because Thatcher gave away the oil we have to the city. She gave away the gas we have to the city in order to keep taxes low, and we're now paying for that. And then she closed all the mines, and so we can't even dig up the coal. What a bloody fiasco. What a complete and utter fiasco. Whether this lot are any better, I don't know, but take one look at Gordon Brown, and frankly, it's hard to be worse.
Caffeinated Conversation with Heather Stott and Friends.
Does the credit crunch hit people's hands?
People, instead of coming in, say, every 12 weeks on average, they're coming every 17 weeks. But we're quite fortunate because we've got a school as well. There's a barrister who's wanted to go into be a hairdresser. I've got a teacher.
I put it to you that your fringe is too long. I'll jump over
Heather Stott.
Are you a rager?
Disgraceful.
Yeah.
Like, watch out. Cupboards are going. I've lost hinges.
Really?
Handles and look at, yeah. I'm an absolute nutcase.
Caffeinated Conversation. The Coffee Club with Heather Stott and Friends.
Absolutely gorgeous to look at.
Tomorrow morning from 9 on BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. Telephone number, if you have something you want to say, you want to join us, you're more than welcome. The number's 0161228 2255, and you can, of course, speak about anything with no pride and even less shame. 0161228 2255. You can email Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and you can text 07786 206 951. Dead easy. 07786 206 951. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and text 07786 206 951. The story in the Sun this morning that I suspect will raise a few hackles, but in an odd sort of a way. In an odd sort of a way, I say, good on her. Good on her. I'm referring to the mother of the man who suffocated his children, then hanged himself. The newspaper The Sun and many others describe him as evil. Well, clearly he was misguided, but the mother of evil David Cass last night insisted he was brave to kill his children. That's what she says, according to The Sun. Lynn Cass, 57, said it must have been the hardest thing for her son to do, to smother his 3-year-old, Ellie, and his 13-month-old, Isabel. She told how he feared losing them after he broke up with their mum. And Lynn revealed Cass, who's 33, told her he would kill himself 2 days before he died. My son, she says, is no monster. Personally, I think it took a lot of guts to do what he did. He must have been tortured. I hope he's at peace and with the girls now. They're making him out to be a monster, but he's not. He was the best dad in the world. He works hard to buy things for them. He told me he couldn't live without the kids. He couldn't handle not seeing them. It must have been the hardest thing in the world for him to do what he did. The man who smothered his 2 children, one aged 13 months and the other aged 3 years, and then, having smothered them, hanged himself. His mother says he's not a monster. It must have taken a lot of courage. It must have been very, very hard to do. Well, I suppose if you've only got the 1 pillar, it's quite hard, but if you've got 2, I should think it's quite easy. But there you are. She says he was brave to do what he did. His action was brave. What do you say? Do you understand? Is it not a mother's duty to see the actions of her son in the best light? Is it not, should she not be saying, he's my son, I understand him, I don't understand what he did, but I do understand the stress he was enduring. That's the only way he saw out of it, and he took a difficult decision, and taking difficult decisions and acting upon them in war is known as heroism. Taking difficult decisions and acting upon them in peace is known as heroism. But what if it's a decision that society clearly disapproves of? And I think suffocating kids falls into that category. What if what he does... So is she right to dismantle the emotions and say, OK, what he did isn't by any stretch of the imagination the acceptable norm, but to actually do something that horrific takes courage? What do you say? 0161 228 2255. Is there any room for the word brave in a situation where a man murders his own children and then takes his life? Is there any room for the word brave? The man's mother thinks there is. What do you think? 0161 228 2255. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and of course you can text 07786 206 951. It's an extraordinary case, an extraordinary claim, you might say. But does that inevitably make it wrong? And David sent us an email. Yes, one of the Davids, folks. David sent it. Do you remember the chap a few weeks back? A bloke come on and said, how accurate are the scales at Manchester Airport? And we got on to Manchester Airport and asked how often are those scales checked, and we were told they are checked regularly by the Trading Standards Department. Well, OK, that's good news. It's rather like when you go into the petrol station, if you look at there's a sort of sticker on the pump that says this pump is checked regularly by Trading Standards, weights and measures and the like. Well, so also are the scales at Manchester Airport. But here is Kevin's tale. Sorry, I said he was a David. He's not. He's a Kevin. Alan, a couple of weeks ago, a caller reported that he suspected the baggage weighing scales at Manchester Airport were inaccurate and were recording higher than was correct. I've just returned from Turkey. Before going, I weighed my 2 cases on my own electronic scales. They weighed 13.5 and 17.5 respectively, a total of 31 kilograms. Thank you for doing the arithmetic. When I arrived at the airport, they'd both gained 2 kilograms, weighing 15.5 and 19.5, totaling 35. On my return journey, they were weighed together at Dalaman Airport, having a combined weight of 31 kilograms, the exact same figure as my own scales recorded before I left. I weighed my cases again on arriving home, and they were again, as before, 13.5, 17.5, a total of 31. I've checked my scales against 2 other electronic scales at work, and they're recording the same figures. So either all 3 of my scales and the scales in Dalaman Airport are inaccurate, or the scales at Manchester are. I've reported this to the carrier, but I think I know what the response will be. Regards, Kevin. And then he says, it didn't cost me anything. I'm just a sad old git with nothing better to do. Fair enough. But thank you for that. It's 12 on BBC Radio Manchester. Richard Stead's got the headlines.
The government's defending its move to nationalise the mortgages of Bradford and Bingley. The deposits are being bought by the Spanish bank Santander. Journey times between Manchester and Leeds could be cut to just 17 minutes if a high-speed rail link spills. The Tories want to build a new line from London to Birmingham and on to Manchester and Leeds. And celebrations are underway in South Manchester for the start of Eid. They're focused on Longsight Market today, while thousands of people are expected to descend on Rush Home tomorrow. Manchester's weather cool and breezy with occasional showers, highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
M61 traffic still queuing on the southbound at junction 4 at Farnworth, with delays as far back as junction 5 West Horton. The main carriageway and entry slip have now been reopened, but it's left traffic heavy in the area after that earlier collision. M62 traffic eastbound still slow because of an earlier broken down vehicle between 11 Birchwood and 12 the Eccles interchange. The outside lane of the 3 has been reopened to traffic, but Matrix is still set at 40. And don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Carl Banks.
You're never more than 20 minutes away from the latest traffic through the day.
Peter says by text, what you just said about Thatcher Beswick was right on the mark. 0161 228 2255. Eric in Salford. Hi, Eric.
Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, sir.
Right, Bradford and Bingley, Northern Rock, etc.
Yeah.
Right. Couple of points, really. The first one is that if somebody trades irresponsibly, like these people have been doing, you know, if you're a gambler and you've got £100 to gamble with and you use £200, don't come striking when you've no money left. Right? That's the point. So, you know, what's happening is these people are doing this, getting into difficulty, and we have no say in it. We have to bail them out. That's what we have to do.
It does appear that we have to do, because the alternative is to let the financial markets collapse, and the consequences of that, apparently, are huge.
Right, so the miners had too much power. So these people have too much power, and what message did it send out? The civil servants were told, if you come knocking our door down for more money and we give it you, what message does that send out? What message did it send out to these banks? You can be as irresponsible as you like and trade foolishly, but don't worry, we'll find somebody to give you the money to get...
Well, there is... I mean, you're absolutely right, and I don't know any way to challenge what you're saying. The banks need to be regulated, because, frankly, they are merely, and you picked it well, they are merely gamblers.
Yeah.
That's all they are. The old institutions of a man in a tweed suit who sat there and discussed with you whether you could afford to repay the loan he was, or you were asking him to make to you, they're gone. They're well gone, because, frankly, they're not lending you the bank's money, they're lending you money that they're borrowing off somebody else anyway.
Yeah.
And if I was a banker now, I'd be spending all the money I could, because it doesn't matter. If it goes wrong, well, that's okay. The government will bail me out.
Yeah.
It's like, do you know what it reminds me of? And I think his name is, the Marquis of Bristol, I think he is. And his family own a great big stately home and are billionaires. And he spent his life piddling everything against the wall. He's a chronic drug addict, or has been during the course of his life. And of course, every time he got into trouble and got into financial debt, along came Daddy and wrote a cheque. So the lad learned nothing and carried on behaving like that. It turns out that's precisely what the government's doing with the bankers.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just bizarre.
But how do we say to the government, well, we're not letting you use our money anymore?
Well, you can't, because,
well, exactly.
because once you've voted a government in, or once you've voted people to Parliament, you then lose any voice of merit until the next election.
Well, go on.
Well, that's the answer to your question. You can write to your MPs, you can write to the Prime Minister, you can write to who the hell you like, but frankly, they are going to do what they think is their only realistic option, and that is to suck up the debt. It's happening in America, it's happening in the UK, the French are starting to look at it now, and I honestly don't know what anyone can do to stop them.
Well, if you look at general elections, there's less and less people voting every time there is one.
Definitely.
Right. So slowly people are beginning to see what is the point of having a general election, because some would say you either get the Tories or the Tories, and you said initially when you started your programme, not long after starting your programme, this lot is probably no different to the Tories.
Well, absolutely. This lot, who've been in for a decade, first of all, the supposed best Chancellor of the Exchequer we've had for 100 years, didn't see it coming, and he's now the Prime Minister. And more importantly, perhaps, because, frankly, Chancellors of the Exchequer predicting the economic future, there's never one got it right in 100 years. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Gordon Brown didn't see this coming is... It's laudable and laughable, but nonetheless inevitable, because that's what happens. But the thing I can remember, I don't know whether you saw it as well, Eric, but I can remember one of the BBC television documentary programmes going out about 5 years ago and agreeing mortgages for £400,000 and £500,000 houses with a wage of 30 grand. Do you remember it?
Vaguely, yes.
And what was happening was they were going to mortgage brokers and they were saying, look, I want a mortgage. And the mortgage broker was saying to them, well, you're never going to get a mortgage on 30,000. Mm-hmm. What you need to do is you need to self-regulate. You need to go away, come back and tell me you're earning 120,000.
Yeah.
So they'd go away, they'd come back, they'd say, actually, I'm earning 120,000.
Yeah.
Well, can you prove it? Well, no, they don't ask that anymore. They just say, yeah, you tell me you're earning 120,000, I can get you the mortgage.
Yeah.
And they get them the mortgage.
Yeah.
And bugger me, they can't pay it. Now, that documentary, and the BBC weren't the only people doing it, Which had a go at it, ITV followed on us doing it, the newspapers had a go at it. What did the government do? In truth, nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing. Why? Because, frankly, they didn't want to upset the city. The Tories don't want to upset the city because the Tories like the city. The Labour Party doesn't want to upset the city because they don't want to be seen as the party that bashes the city. The Lib Dems will upset anyone because they've got no smell of government. So that's how it is. The city are in control and they can't even control their own bladders.
Well, you know what the bottom line of all that is to me, Alan?
Go on.
The bottom line of it all is there's no such thing as a free market and democracy is crumbling.
You could be right. You could be right. I hope the exact opposite is the case, and we can think for ourselves whether we consider this. But given what a complete mess the last 40 years of government have made of our finances, and that includes Thatcher's decade and Blair's decade, given the complete and utter mess they've made of or they've allowed others to make of our finances, perhaps people will turn out and vote next time, but before they do so, ask some searching questions, instead of just saying, who's going to charge less for income tax? Oh, I'll vote for them then.
Exactly.
So perhaps people will start to realise that when a government says we'll give you this, they're lying.
Mm-hmm.
They are lying.
Yeah.
So perhaps it'll help democracy. Perhaps people will actually get back and say, look, we can't leave it alone. We can't just ignore it because they're all the same, because they're all shafting us.
Yeah.
We shall see. Good on you, Eric. Will you be voting next time?
No.
Why not?
Well, what is the point? What is the point? I'd be a total hypocrite. I mean, just, you know, if I can't see, you know, any way forward because somebody can do irresponsible things, hold the country to ransom while they do it, and support them and absolutely smash the miners because they had too much power.
All right, mate, good on you.
Okay,
the miners were smashed by Margaret Thatcher because, in her view, and the view of many who rang this programme at the time and still, in her view, the miners were far too powerful. More accurately, the trade union movement was far too powerful. Well, it now seems, according to Eric, that the financial wizards of the city are far too powerful. The difference is, when the miners were smashed, communities closed, villages closed, pits closed, thousands upon thousands lost their jobs, many of whom have never got back the earning capacity they have. The town I live near, Lee, was a mining town. For a decade, it was like a dirty ghost town. I'm sorry, Lee, it was. You know it and I know it. It was like a dirty ghost town. It's picking up. It is slowly pulling itself up by its bootstraps with a bit of help from the local authority and some money from the coal, what was it, the coal community or whatever it was called, from Europe. Well, OK, it's slowly but surely rebuilt itself, but the loss of the pits crucified Lee and other mining towns up and down the land. It absolutely crucified them. As I say, turned them into dirty ghost towns. Well, times are changing and they're on the way back. The trouble is, are they on the way back? Are those small northern towns that have dug themselves out of the hole, are they actually digging themselves out of the hole with money they've borrowed that they can't pay back? It's looking like that way for some, isn't it? 0161 228 2255. What do you say? What should the government do? Instead of buying businesses that can't operate, that can't work, what do you think the government should be doing? I know you're not a high financier, neither am I. All I know is there's somebody spending a lot of our money to buy a pup, to buy a crap product. That's what's going on. If somebody said to you, that house over there, if it had a roof on and some walls and the floors didn't leak, it'd be worth 100,000. In the current state, it's worth 5,000. You say, I'll have 5 of them. I'll have 5 of them. Doesn't matter. I'll never sell it. I'll never sell it on because it's a pile of crap. I'll buy it anyway. That's what the government's just done with 2 banks. Bradford and Bingley, 12 months ago, just less, the Northern Rock. They're both crap, they both fall into bits, they're both run by clowns at best, crooks at worst, but I think nearer clowns than crooks. But they've both been operated badly, they've been both been up to no good, they're both a bucket of crap. What should we do them? I know what we'll do with them. We'll buy them with taxpayers' money. Is there something else they could have done, in your view? Should they have just said, go to hell, go under, let them die? 0161 228 2255. Duncan in Newton Willers. Hiya, Duncan.
Hello, can I say hello to my dad as well?
No.
He was just a few minutes ago. He was that was Eric, by the way, my dad.
All right, so it's a family affair, is it? Go on.
Yes, it is, yeah. I explained to you guy on the phone, he's left wing and I'm just to the right of Margaret Thatcher, so just give me a break, okay?
You'll be lonely in Newton Willers, but go on.
No, but all I was saying, he had a conversation with me before he come on.
Well, tell me what you've got to say, because we don't want to know what goes on between father and son. So just tell me what you've got to say on the basis of what he said on here.
All I've got, I just made a point. No, I just said, my question to him was before he come on, I said, well, what do you want him to do? Do you want him to bail the banks out or not? And, you know, they've got no choice to do.
What do you want them to do?
I want them to bail them out and try and sort it out. Of course I do. I know it's my money that I've paid.
Well, when you say try and sort it out, how does buying a failing bank sort it out?
You're probably going to disagree with this, right?
I'm asking your opinion.
Right,
I can't.
Okay, no, listen to me. Listen to me.
I was doing.
You have to trust the people who are up doing that job, because I don't know what's going on in the banking system, how it works.
Hang on.
Go on.
Isn't that a little bit like saying the bloke that's just robbed that bank over there, I should trust him because he's the only one who knows how banks get robbed? No,
because you're implying that the people who have done this have done it on purpose as some kind of of some kind of scam. Like, you just used a bank robber as an example. It's not a fair comparison.
Well, okay, let me give you a reality rather than an analogy.
Yeah.
I'm not really accusing the people who have led our banking industry in the direction they have of crookery.
Right.
But they have taken risks that, frankly, were not rational.
Right. When was the last time you done that? Took a risk that wasn't rational? Right. 'Cause I've done it a few times.
With somebody else's money, I think I'm going for never. I've done it with mine, but not with somebody else's.
Right. Do you have a family?
Yes,
Wasn't it theirs?
everybody has a
Wasn't it
family.
their money?
It depends on your definition of there. But if you're talking about have I ever taken an unusual, an unpredictable, or, well, unpredictable is inevitable with risk,
Yeah.
but have I ever risked the livelihood of my family for an unlikely return? No.
Right, okay.
No.
What if that was
I
in your
wouldn't do
job
that.
description? Because
I wouldn't take the job.
No, all right.
It's like if you ask me the question, it's a bad analogy. If you ask me the question, would I, as a public executioner, hang people? No, but then it's unlikely I'd apply for the job.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't do that.
No, that's fine, but it was in their job description to gamble the money, because we can use that word, because that's what they were doing.
That is
and
precisely.
No one was complaining a few years ago when everyone was going out and getting mortgages and letting them out and stuff like that.
Well,
I know
actually,
it's
they
gonna be
were.
wrong.
Well, Duncan, I'm sorry, you're wrong. They were complaining.
Who was complaining?
Well, the Consumers Association was complaining.
Well, what about?
About the fact that the money that was being given to people to purchase property was in many, many cases an irrational loan. They were complaining that safeguards were not being maintained, that the rules and regulations in the banking industry were being sidestepped. There were all sorts of complaints going on. The
Well, there was
financial
obviously people
pages were dealing
borrowing.
with it. Pardon?
There was people borrowing the money who wasn't complaining. That's what I'm saying. These groups are always going to complain about something because that's what they're there for. I'm on about you and me, and I'm using the royal we as people who've gone out and they've bought houses and stuff like that.
Well, okay, let's come back to it then. If I applied to you for a loan of £100,000, and you knew I could not repay you, and that I would be relying, or you would be relying on your repayment to be disguised, because for you to sell me that loan, you get a bonus.
Are you about self-certification and things like that? Is that what you mean?
Yes. So self-certification came in because the regulations, the self-imposed regulations, meant that the person dealing with the request for a loan wouldn't get his commission.
Right, so who are you pointing the finger at? The person who...
There I'm pointing my finger at A, the person who made that initial decision, B, the person above him or her who permitted the decision to stand, C, the person above them, and it goes all the way to the board, the person above them who allowed it to go on despite the fact their auditors told them it was going on.
Right, and what about the person who actually applied for the loan?
The person who applied for the loan is also guilty, but...
Thank you.
But not as guilty as the others, because he has a different agenda. It's called trying to find a home, and he, or she, making the loan, cannot be expected to understand all the regulations.
Once you're over 18, you're the big boy or big girl. So
You are indeed a big boy. You are indeed a big boy.
So
but frankly,
I can't accept that.
But frankly, Duncan, just because you're a big boy doesn't mean that you are completely sensible. I've already conceded to you that that individual carries some of the blame, but those people who knowingly sidestep the regulations when they are required by law to obey them, frankly, they are the criminals.
Right, so do you think, in your opinion, that they knew this was going to happen and thought, sod it, we'll get a bonus and go and buy a yacht?
Yes, in simple terms. I don't know whether they were going to buy a yacht, but I think they were driven by the bonus rather than by anything else. And if you think that's untrue, if you think that's questionable, then go back to the financial industry for the past 40 years, and what have we had? Well, let's go to the mis-selling of pensions. They knew those pensions could not deliver what they said they would deliver, but if they sold them, they got the benefit. The banks knew it, the pension companies knew it, the salesmen knew it, everybody knew it, bar the four cretin that bought it. The mis-selling of mortgages protected by endowment. They knew that that could happen. They knew that that almost certainly would happen, but the bonuses were worth it, so they did it. The financial industry has been run by gambling crooks for decades. And consecutive governments have done nothing about it.
Okay, well, so let's just forget the finger pointing, right, for a minute, right?
Okay.
And let's just have a look at the problem in hand, which is everything looks like it's going to go down the tube if we don't bail it out, right?
Indeed.
What would you prefer them to do? Do you want them to take taxpayers' money and pay it, or do you want to let it collapse?
I think if they're going to nationalise the banks, they should nationalise them and retain them.
You know the mechanics of what
you asked me a question, do you want the answer?
Sorry, go on, carry on.
What they have done with Bradford and Bingley, apparently, we won't know till the paperwork's sealed,
right.
But what they've done with Bradford and Bingley is they've taken over the bank and they've sold off the viable assets and kept the crap for you and me to pay.
Right.
Now, there will be some benefit in this, because there will be people who are way behind on their mortgage with Bradford and Bingley who, frankly, might just get away with it.
Right.
It's cretinous. I've got to go, Duncan. Good to talk to you. 0161 228 2255. I've got to go to do this. He's just gone 20 to 1. BBC Radio Manchester News Headlines. Richard Stead.
The government's defending its move to nationalise the mortgages which belong to Bradford and Bingley. The deposits are being bought by the Spanish bank Santander. Our environmental groups are welcoming Conservative plans to build a high-speed rail link between Manchester and London. A new line could cut journey times to the capital to just 80 minutes. And celebrations are underway in South Manchester for the start of Eid. Today they're focused on Longside Market, with thousands of people expected in rush home tomorrow night. Manchester's weather cool and breezy with occasional showers, highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, traffic's still fairly heavy on the M61. In fact, southbound it's queuing all the way back from Junction 4 at Farnworth to Junction 5 West Horton because of an earlier collision on the carriageway. There were closures in operation for a short time. They've all since been lifted, but traffic's struggling to get back to normal. M62 traffic eastbound towards Manchester is also slow because of an earlier broken down vehicle between Junction 11 at Birchwood and Junction 12 at the Eccles interchange. But thankfully, traffic on the M67 is finally easing on the eastbound stretch between 2 Kingston and Mottram Road. Don't forget, the tram stops at Piccadilly and Piccadilly Gardens are closed off for the next 8 weeks for engineering works to take place. And Cross Country have a revised service between Birmingham New Street and York owing to engineering works on the tracks. Don't forget, though, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Good afternoon. Lancashire all-rounder Andrew Flintoff and bowler James Anderson have both been included in England's 15-man party for this winter's Test tour of India. Wicketkeeper Matt Pryor has been recalled, whilst Owais Shah is picked in place of Ravi Bopara. And cap spinner Graeme Swann has also made the cut, and Lancs bowler Sajid Mahmood has been named in the performance squad. Lancashire manager Mike Watkinson, meanwhile, has denied he's under pressure after the club failed to come close to winning a trophy this season. The Red Rose were relegated in the Pro 40, didn't progress in the 2020 and only secured their county championship Division 1 status on the last day of the season.
Not especially anymore. I still have a contract. I think the lads that we've developed have shown that the system's working. Every time we play, we're up against 6 or 7 players who've learned the cricket in other countries, and we're not about that. And I hope people take that into account when they make the judgments and they see that we're trying to play and compete and do things in the right way.
Manchester United's Gary Neville and Owen Hargreaves have been left out of the squad to face Aalborg in tomorrow night's match in Champions League group stage. The duo weren't on the plane that left for Denmark this morning. Hargreaves is still sidelined with a knee injury, whilst Neville is being eased back into first-team football. Stockport manager Jim Gannon says he'll appoint Michael Rains as captain for County's next game against Oldham this Friday. Gannon is set to have talks with skipper Gareth Owen after the defender reacted angrily to being substituted in Saturday's 2-2 draw with Cheltenham.
I won't accept anybody reacting like that, and I'll deal with it on Monday. At this stage, in my mind, is Michael Rains, captain, leader, the greatest competitor we have at the club, and the most important player. So he's been captain before in a winning team at this club, and look forward to him captaining the team on Friday night.
Steve Bruce praised Wigan's defensive performance after their win over Manchester City at the JJB Stadium. The Latics won 2-1 with goals from Antonio Valencia and a penalty from Amir Zaki. But for Bruce, it was his defenders that deserved the plaudits.
The defenders never get the pats on the back like the dribblers or the goal scorers. So fair play to them. They've stuck at it. In particular, Titus. He has his critics. You know, he's produced this season, apart from an own goal, some of the best football of his career. He looks really, really up for the challenge of it and concentrated, and I hope that keeps him improving.
Leeds Rhinos could be without winger Lee Smith for Saturday's grand final against St Helens at Old Trafford. The player was placed on report for allegedly kicking Wigan second rower Phil Bailey in the face during Friday's playoff victory. Smith will face a suspension of up to 4 matches if found guilty at tomorrow's disciplinary hearing. Widnes Vikings have signed St Helens forward Sam Thompson. The 21-year-old, who previously played academy rugby at Salford, has signed a 2-year deal at the Halton Stadium. St Helens will lose their current strength and conditioning coach at the end of the season. Apollo Parolini is to leave Knowsley Road to head up an elite sporting academy in Dubai. Oldham coach Steve Deakin is determined to get promoted to National League One next season. The Roughheads yesterday lost in the League Two grand final for the second successive year, but Deakin says he'll keep going after he's had a well-earned rest.
I haven't had a weekend off since January the 13th. I'm going to go out, have a holiday with my wife, and get a little bit of free time and hopefully recharge the batteries, and hopefully, like the players, come back better and stronger for next year, and I'm focused on getting out of the NL2.
And finally, in Speedway, Bellevue's latest signing, Thomas Pease, goes straight into tonight's crucial Elite League match against Coventry. A win for the Aces will see them avoid a relegation playoff.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
After 2 defeats from their last 2 matches, Manchester City return to action in the UEFA Cup this Thursday. They play Ammonia in the second leg of the first round at Eastlands. We've got full match commentary from 7.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Texts are flowing in fast and furious on 07786206951. If you want to email, it's radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk. You want to converse, it's 0161 228 2255. I'm going to go to John in Bolton in a moment. Alan, I have an insurance policy with Bradford and Bingley to cover some of our mortgage if I die. Is it still valid? Worried of Oldham. I think the answer to that question, worried of Oldham, is yes, because that will almost certainly be underwritten by Santander or the insurance company that Bradford and Bingley laid it off with. But insurance policies are largely protected. It's probably best to ask the Bradford and Bingley, or because they'll be trading to a certain extent. The shops are still there and all of that. So I would ask the Bradford and Bingley, but I think the answer to the question is almost certainly yes. Jim in Bury, I'd like to see the government do something, anything. They've done nothing for 6 months, always doing knee-jerk reactions. I'd like to see something done before the brown stuff hits the proverbial, just for a change. Well, I think the brown stuff may well be the Prime Minister himself. Alan, let them all crash and let's have a bleeding good recession. It might stop everyone being so wasteful. Dave on his bus. As regard to Tory railway plans, you've heard about those from Richard in the news this morning. The Tory railway plans include rail links all over the place, no new airport in London, and a fast rail line to Heathrow. Well, OK, but it also includes, did he say an 18-minute to Leeds train journey? Extraordinary. Well, Neil in Warrington says, as regards the Tory railway plans, it's a pity they didn't destroy it, as they did in the 60s. A party that was total anti-rail. That's Neil in Warrington. Let's talk to John in Bolton. Hiya, John.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got, mate?
My point is that in all this, what really is angry is that the senior politicians and Brown, who was Chancellor, when all this reckless lending was going on, knew all about it. He knew all about mortgages that were being given 5-6 times people's salary. He knew all about the false certification, and he knew all about credit cards that were being dished out like confetti. And he didn't do anything about it. And the reason he didn't do anything about it, and I just want to sort of clarify something here, I'm a Labour supporter, I'm also a member of the Labour Party. But Brown did nothing about it because it made him look good. He got political gain out of a false boom. And he should be thrown out of office as a result. This guy was never voted in by us. He wasn't even voted in by the Labour Party. He was nominated by Blair at a meeting 11, 12 years ago, whenever it was, and the guy did nothing about it. Everybody was talking about multiple credit cards. You know, people could have a credit card for 10 grand. You could go and get multiples of 10 grand. Instead of having one card of 10 grand, you know, you should only have, or you could have one card of 10 grand or 10 cards of 1 grand. Not the sort of multiple cards that he and his regime allowed on. So it's not just mortgages, it's credit cards as well, and he did nothing about it because it made him look good. Where the guys in the city have earned financial bonuses, he got financial gain, and as a result, this is the mess we're in.
Well, OK, and you can very easily point the finger at Brown, and many have done so, and it's hard to disagree with you. You're a member of the Labour Party. The truth is that Brown didn't do it alone. He had junior ministers of various names over the years. Blair must have known all about it, and frankly, so also must, and you said, senior politicians. I think some of the junior ones might have known as well. What you're actually saying is your party, the Labour Party in government, rather than do the proper thing, did the greedy thing. Your party, in your view, is a bunch of lying thieves.
Well, Brown is.
No. You can narrow it down to Brown if you like, because he was at the top of the tree.
Well,
but unfortunately, the tree itself is rancid.
Well, I would have to agree with you, but I mean, in politics, you know, the buck stops at the guy at the top. And whilst all this was going on, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Brown was at the top of the tree, and it's he who should fall on his sword.
Well, OK,
he's trying to hide behind this. That's in America. We know what's in America is bad, but it was also going on within the UK.
But John, the case you've just made, as a paid-up member of the Labour Party, the case you've just made is, because you and I both know that Brown isn't going to do what you suggest he should, and all of that, and none of the other leaders are going to do that either. So really, the only people who can get rid of Brown and people like him are the electorate in about 18 months' time, when he finally gets the balls to have an election. And frankly, what you are saying is, we've seen this lot, vote them out.
Yeah, definitely.
Your party should be voted out, in your view.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying to you is that Brown, not only, I mean, he also, sadly, has got this sort of image of himself. He's a number one. Well, he isn't actually. You know, in life, there's number ones and number twos. There's Alex Ferguson and there's Brian Kidd, and they both did a good job. But Brian Kidd was never going to be a good number one. He was always going to be a good number two. It turns out, actually, Brown wasn't even a good number two. Because he wasn't even a good number two, Alan. He saw this. The guy before, he said, well, who was complaining? Well, a lot of people were complaining. There have been notices in the press for the last 4 to 5 years. There is far too much credit about. Giving out reckless credit is no different to giving out drugs. The guys, I mean, the guy who runs Cleveland, Ohio, the mayor, when he asked the people who were giving out all these loans, and it's highlighted in the states, Cleveland, Ohio, the city of Cleveland, is the worst affected in this subprime market. And the reason that the answer that came back from these financial institutions was that the money that they were getting was too good, in exactly the same way as drug dealers. So these people in the city are no different to drug dealers. The harm that this financial crisis could have on the Western world is probably the same effect as putting 1 million more drug dealers on the streets of Western Europe and the US. And that is the effect that giving out reckless bad credit can have on society. And they were allowed to get away with it. And Brown, as the top of the tree, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, knew this and did nothing because his payback was political gain. Look at me. It's nothing to do with the economic policy.
So when Gordon Brown criticises the extraordinary bonuses driving the city, is in fact speaking with two tongues, as the American Indians used to say, because he too was getting an extraordinary bonus, not in the form of money, but in the form of electoral support.
Exactly it.
So he's as crooked and as greedy as them.
He's as crooked, as greedy as them. There's no doubt about it. Why would he not? Why? I mean, I presume as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he must have some effect on financial regulators. That is the job of government. Why didn't the government pull him when they knew that this reckless mortgage giving and reckless credit card giving was out of control? Why didn't they rein it in? Why did they allow it in the first place to happen? And he did it because it made him look good.
All right, John.
He's as big a crook him as the guys in the city.
Good to talk to you, John. Thank you very much indeed. 01612282255. What do you think about the mess the financial services are in? The government of the past 10 years. OK, you can blame Thatcher for if you like, demutualising, if you like, privatising, but it wasn't quite that, but demutualising the building society. She permitted that. She allowed them to fall into the hands, for want of a better term, of the city, but she was a firm believer in the city. You can blame her for that. But Brown has been the Chancellor of the Exchequer for a decade. He's now the Prime Minister for a decade, and in John's words, did absolutely nothing to prevent that which has happened. And he knew it was happening. That's what John said. It's hard to argue. What do you say?
Britain and America, two great nations linked throughout history.
Yeah, but I will start getting blamed for it. What the hell are you talking about?
But what about the people of our two countries?
I love hamburgers. I eat hamburger every day.
Every hour by the looks of you.
Who are they? What do they? How do you do?
My wife's about to have a baby. Computer says no.
It's time for Little Britain, USA. Friday night from 9:30 on BBC One.
A very good day to you. How are you? Laurie in Kingsley, I think it is. It is. Hiya, Laurie.
Hello, Alan. How you doing?
Not bad, mate. What you got?
I think computer said yes too many times. Never mind, computer said no just now. With the banks.
All right.
Do you find it ironic, Alan, that the organisations in the last 10 to 15 years, the banks, I'm talking about banks in general now, not specifically Bradford and Bingley and Northern Rock, the banks, anybody who faltered on their account and couldn't manage their account went over by £1. They charged them approximately £30. Every time they did it, they fined them £30.
Yeah.
And now those very same people are amongst the people who are helping the banks out with money in the form of taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's wrong, isn't it?
Wrong? I think some would say it's not wrong, it's business.
Well, no. There's ethical business and unethical business.
Well, we had a man in the studios on Saturday. I don't know whether you listened to the Saturday morning version.
I saw a bit of it. I heard a bit of it, rather.
Well, the man who introduced ethical banking to the Co-op Bank, Terry Thomas, now Lord Thomas of Macclesfield, was in talking to us for coffee.
Right.
And he was dead set against the demutualisation of the building societies. And what they did, they asked, I think it was 30,000 customers of the Co-op Bank, what do you want us to do in terms of being ethical?
Yeah.
And in fact, it just so happens that today, that survey, that's all it is, that survey of the customers starts again today. Over the next 12 months, they'll ask their customers what they should be investing in and should not be investing in the like. But I very much suspect that they won't be asking them whether they should lend money that they haven't got to people who can't afford to give it them back.
Well, they may just do it because some of them are daft enough to ask those sort of questions. They obviously haven't got the brains that a common man in the street has got.
Well, that's always the thing, isn't it? We should all read Dickens and have a bit of Macaw, but I'd love to talk to you for longer, Laurie. If you want to talk to us after 1 o'clock, tell Justin, our producer, today, and we'll ring you back. Otherwise, thanks and goodbye.
A rundown of the big new movies out this week, plus the day's news dissected, tonight from 10 with me, Sam Walker.
Bradford and Bingley has been bought by the government and then the good stuff passed over, sold or otherwise, to Santander, leaving you, me and every other taxpayer with the crap. What do you say today in all the numbers?
95.1 FM, DAB Digital Radio, and the World Wide Web. This is Manchester. BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, Gordon Brown defends buying another bank, and environmental groups welcome Tory plans for a high-speed rail link between Manchester and London.
England named their test squad for the tour of India.
Well, this afternoon will be cool, breezy and showery. Little bit of brightness. Top temperatures 15 Celsius.
And if you're travelling along the M61, southbound traffic around Junction 4 at Farnworth still queuing up because of an earlier accident.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard Stead. Gordon Brown's defending the decision to nationalise the mortgages which belong to Bradford and Bingley. The savings are being bought by Santander, and the Prime Minister says the stability of the economy comes first.
We will continue to do whatever is necessary over these next few days in very difficult times, turbulent times around the world, to make sure that the British stability, for which we have done a great deal over these last few years, is maintained. And that's why the actions have been taken in the way they have.
Meanwhile, Shadow Chancellor and Tatton MP George Osborne's insisting Gordon Brown's partly responsible for the credit crisis because he ran the economy for 10 years.
I'm not going to claim that this problem only exists in Britain or that it's all the fault of the current government. But nor will I let them forget who sat there in the Treasury for 10 years while the regulation failed, the debt soared, and no one called time on the age of irresponsibility.
Environmental groups are welcoming Conservative plans to build a high-speed rail link between Manchester and London. The Tories want to scrap a third runway at Heathrow and build a new rail line, cutting journey times to the capital to 80 minutes. Jason Torrance from the Campaign for Better Transport says he hopes the plans become a reality.
The promises by the Conservatives today need to be put into action and, of course, should provide real incentive for the current government to actually get out of the very short-sighted thinking that they have that confines people to cattle truck-like experiences on our rail network towards a bright new high-speed rail future.
A driver's been taken to hospital with minor injuries after colliding with a police patrol car in Littleborough. It happened this morning at the junction of Todmorden Road and Barnes Meadows, which is closed while the incident's being dealt with. Landlords could be taken to court if they don't sign up to a scheme to help cut the number of rundown homes in Salford. Seedley and Langworth is the first area in the country to introduce licensing for landlords to make sure properties are up to scratch. 45 private landlords still haven't registered, and Salford Council say they face a fine of up to £20,000. Celebrations are underway in South Manchester for the start of Eid. Today they're focused on Longsight Market, but tomorrow thousands of people are expected to descend on Rusholme. In the past there's been trouble, but Chief Superintendent Wasim Chowdhury says troublemakers won't be welcome.
There's in excess of 10,000 people that come to Rusholme over the 2-day period that Eid al-Fitr is celebrated. With that brings a variety of issues such as traffic congestion, large numbers of people in a tight area, approximately a mile in length, and because of that we do face sometimes outbreaks of public disorder.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Dennis Lloyd.
Lancashire all-rounder Andrew Flintoff and bowler James Anderson have both been included in England's 15-man party for this winter's Test tour of India. Kevin Peterson will captain the side. Wicketkeeper Matt Pryor has been recalled, whilst Owais Shah is picked in place of Ravi Bopara. Uncapped spinner Graham Swan has also made the cut. Lancashire bowler Sajid Mahmood has been named in the performance squad. Manchester United will be without captain Gary Neville Neville and Owen Hargreaves for tomorrow night's Champions League group match against Aalborg. Both were absent when the squad flew to Denmark this morning. Hargreaves is struggling with a knee injury, whilst Neville is still being eased back into first-team football. Everton have appealed to the Football Association after midfielder Tim Cahill was sent off against Liverpool on Saturday. The Australia international was dismissed for his lunging tackle on Xabi Alonso. And Widnes Vikings have signed St Helens forward Sam Thompson. The 21-year-old has signed a 2-year deal at the Halton Stadium.
BBC Radio Manchester. Satellite weather.
Well, this afternoon we are going to see one or two showers. We'll see some brightness from time to time, but it does feel cool and it does feel breezy. A lot of cloud around and top temperatures getting to around 15 Celsius.
Breezy always makes me think of Billy Cotton Band show. Marvellous time.
Belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Hi, I got an email from Henry in Prestbury. Hi, Henry. And he says this, I will merely pass it on, you must do with it what you will. At 8 o'clock tonight on ITV, the Tonight programme is titled The Tax Factor, and it concerns all the stealth taxes now being imposed upon us. I believe it features, says Henry, I believe it features the congestion charge in London, and therefore will be interesting viewing for the workforce of Greater Manchester. I pass it on. 8 o'clock tonight, according to Henry, the tax factor, it's a list of stealth taxes, including London's congestion charge. Now, London's congestion charge is not the same as Manchester's in the way it operates and will operate, assuming the Manchester one ever happens, but there it is. I don't normally advertise programmes on the ITV, and frankly, won't make a habit of it. Screw 'em, say I. Anyway, they'll be shut soon. Well, certainly locally. Beswick, thank you for your party political broadcast for the Labour Party. You're bang out of order for poisoning your listeners with your warped opinion about Mrs Thatcher. Well, frankly, I can hold whatever opinion I like about Mrs Thatcher, because that, of course, is history, and you don't have to be balanced on history. You plonker, says Rick in Bolton. Well, you must decide for yourself whether Rick's right. I know I think he is. What happens to Bradford and Bingley shareholders, asks John in Hazel Grove. I got free shares, but Bradford and Bingley then told me to take dividends as shares. The AGM then said that's the annual general meeting, then said the company was sound. The Bradford and Bingley sold me more shares in a rights issue. If I get nothing, then the managers had better get nothing too. If they still get their bonuses, this will be disgraceful. If they get 20 pence a share, then I should get the same. That's John in Hazel Grove. Well, you will get the value of the share. If the share is valued at 20 pence, then that is what you will get, assuming you sell. You could, of course, hold on to them. I don't know. I've no idea about the share value, because normally when a company is sold, it's the shareholders that get the money. But if it's been taken over because the share value was at nil, then that's what you get. Now, the government has then passed on, and notice I say passed on, not sold, but the government has then passed on, sold the profitable side of the business to Santander. And yes, if the government get a share value from that, you might argue that that should be yours. It depends on how it's been structured, and frankly, I don't know how the sale has been structured. Whether the government has sold without taking possession of the profitable parts of the business, and if that is so, my understanding is that you will get the value, assuming the value is there, because, of course, it's a loss-making company. Anyway, your shares are worth what they're worth on the stock exchange, and that's not by any means a lot. Talk to your broker. 0161 228 2255. Chris in Hayfield. Hiya, Chris.
Hello, Alan.
Hello, mate.
Hi. I listened to John before the news, and I agree with what he's saying. The real villain in this crisis is not the bankers. It's Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
How are they the real villains?
We've got to go back some time here, about 10 to 11 years. There was tremendous growth in certain industries in this country, particularly the computer industry, and because of that, the consequence of that was growth in the internet and internet-related businesses. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown decided against that growth to expand the public sector They did this by taxing us more and borrowing more. At the same time as this was going on, the Bank of England were pumping huge sums of money into the banking institutions of this country. This in itself caused a huge speculative boom in house prices. The excess money that was going into the banks was spilling over into the economy and pushing up the prices of houses. At the same time, what happens is when the government borrow money, they're in essence printing money, and this devalues any savings that people had. So when the Bank of England realised that savings were being eroded by government borrowing, they decided to raise interest rates, and this is where the mess all stems from. But it was the government in the first place that, under their policy, allowed the Bank of England to pump excess amounts of money into the bank.
The Bank of England were, if you like, unfree. They were detached from government, but they were detached from government and given one target. They didn't have to control the economy, as you know. They only had to control inflation. That was the only target they had. They had no other. And so everything they did to meet the target. So in that respect, you are right to look to the government and say, well, you set the target, and the target was an obscure one or an obtuse one, and therefore the bank was stymied in its abilities. The idea that the Labour Party in power have increased the public employment, if you like. Well, yes, they have, but most of that, I understand, has been in schools. We've got more teachers and more spending in education. Most of that has been in doctors and nurses. They said in the election categorically that they would recruit more doctors, more nurses, more police officers, and they have done that. Well, you can't do that without increasing the number of people employed by government one way or another. So did they have much of a choice?
Yes, they did. They did. We have a fiat money economy in this country.
We have a what, I'm sorry?
A fiat money economy in this country.
I don't know that term. You'll have to explain it to me, sorry.
In other words, what I mean is the government are able, through the Bank of England, to print money as and when
now I know what
they
you
need.
Mean. Yeah, OK, go on. Yeah.
If we had been tied to a gold standard, this mess that we're in now could not have occurred, because the Bank of England would have been tied, the amount of money...
would have been tied to the gold standard, yes. But there isn't a Western nation tied to the gold standard that I'm aware of. Well, they've all freed away from it. No, you might... I mean, it's that thing on I nearly said a pound note, just demonstrating my age once again, but on a £5 note, I promised to pay the bearer, and that promise was linked to the gold standard. This piece of paper is worth £5 worth of gold, for want of a better term. That was the gold standard. Yes. But all the nations have freed themselves of that benefit or burden.
That's why we're in the mess we're in today. You are right. Gold was tied to a certain number of grains. The pound was tied to a certain number of grains of gold.
Yeah, a pound's worth of gold.
Yeah. And I think we should return to the gold standard, because...
Well, that will be hard, because I believe Gordon Brown has actually sold all the gold.
He sold a lot of the gold,
He sold a lot of the gold, so I'm not altogether sure that we could do it. He'd have to go and buy it bank. Rather than buying banks, it might be a better idea to go and buy gold. We shall see. I'll watch out for him in the jewellers.
Alan, he sold the gold at, I think it was just under about $300 an ounce, I think it was. May have been lower than that. Gold today is worth $900 an ounce. But if we were tied to the gold standard, governments could not print money to the degree that they've done, and they could not the Bank of England could not pump in excess amount of money into the banking institution that causes speculative boom and bust in the long term.
All right,
so
mate.
Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, let's not forget Tony Blair in this.
No, indeed.
He was the one who started this. Gordon Brown went along with it, as well as the rest of the Labour Party, and we're in deep trouble now, because if he continues to bail out banks, we could see the collapse of the pound completely. and we'll all be knackered. We'll all have money in the banks, but we won't be able to buy anything with it.
All right.
Very nervous.
Bit like Zimbabwe. Have a good day, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. Another Chris, the Mad Mank, he described himself as, dear Alan. As regards Mrs Thatcher and also the current financial situation, it seems you can fool all the people all the time because they are already all fools. Thatcherites must be flattered to get the blame for things messed up this far down the line. Has Westminster been vacant since her departure? Susan, the answer to that is no, but it might well have been for what they have done. You could say that Margaret Thatcher released the man-eating tiger, and this bunch of clowns that have been running it for the past 10 years have done bugger all to catch it. It's a bad analogy, but it covers it. 0161 228 2255. The pound in your pocket is not the real pound, said Harold Wilson. By the bloody hell, where's he now? Well, I'll tell you where he is. He's celebrating the fact that the Labour Party now owns 2 banks, or at least the government does.
Remember at school when the teacher asked you a question in front of the whole class and you didn't know the answer? Well, that's the humility my poor old producer suffers with the terrifyingly tricksy killer question.
Sam Walker.
And what's more, to find out the answer, they're not allowed to use the internet, they're not allowed to phone a friend, but they do have something far more precious, and that's you. So switch on your brains, get your wits about you, and be ready to be part of the killer question.
Sam Walker.
Tonight from 10
at BBC Radio Manchester.
Dave in St Helens. Hiya, Dave.
Hiya, hello.
What have you got, mate?
Well, I've heard you in the past telling people when they're owed money to go to the small claims court with the claims.
Yes.
Well, I've done that over the last 12 months, and it's ended up costing me more money, and I found out the courts and the bailiffs haven't any powers at all.
Well, yes, that is so, if you like. To say they have no powers is not quite correct, but I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
The rules of how to claim money rely on the fact that the person you're claiming the money from has the money, and rely on the fact that they would need to be honourable and pay their debts. There are things that can be done if they do not, but yes, it is difficult to actually enforce a debt.
Yeah.
The power of a court judgment against an individual is it affects their creditability. Their ability to get credit in the future. It affects their reputation in terms of credit.
Right.
So that's where the real power lies, and that is, I will grant you, a big, long string power. It doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah. So there's nothing I can do now. I've been to the courts.
Well, it depends. It depends on who you've won your case against, assuming you have.
Well, he didn't. He just ignored the letters from the courts.
Yes.
So they sent me a letter saying that the case had gone in my favour, like type of thing. And
it's called judgment by default, yes.
Yeah. Then they said to me he'd ignored everything, so they said just put it with the bailiffs.
Mm-hmm.
I did that. That's cost me 2 lots of money, one for the court and one for the bailiffs. Now I found out that if he doesn't answer the door to the bailiffs, or even if he does answer the door and tells them to go away, there's nothing they can do.
Well, there are steps you can take, because it is possible to get the bailiffs thus empowered. The bailiffs do not have the right of entry, but the right of entry can be created legally by giving the right of entry to the bailiffs via the court to enforce a judgment against the cooperation, despite the lack of cooperation from the debtor, and to do that would then be supported by a police officer. So the police officer could go as the agent of the court and gain access to the property, thus to allow access for the bailiff.
Yeah.
There are other things you can do, I mean, a variety of things, but when I say to people, go to the small claims court, it's because there isn't an alternative. They don't have any other way of getting their money, and I almost always say, if not universally so, I almost always say, but bear in mind that you're relying on the goodwill of the individual to care.
Well, if they're not going to pay in the first place, I don't think they're going to really care about the courts, are they?
Well, that's not true at all. That isn't true at all. Most people who have a judgment against them discharge that judgment, but there will be some that do not. We don't have a debtor's prison in our society. There are countries where they do, and we did used to. In fact, it was the only thing you could go to prison for in this country many, many years ago. All they had was corporal punishment or sending you to Australia. I'm not sure which is worse. But the only people in jail... The only people actually in jail were people who owed money. They only had debtors' prisons. That's a little bit of history that's valueless. But, yes, if a person says, I don't care about my reputation, I'm not going to pay you and all the rest of it, then, frankly, there is almost nothing you can do. And you have to consider that when entering into litigation. The lawyers have an old-fashioned phrase for it. Never mind the case, is he worth the powder and shot? In other words, is it worth the effort to chase it in order to find it?
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
So, but you know, I don't know what we do about that.
Right, it's a matter of principle, really. It's not the money.
Matters of principle should never go to court.
Yeah,
they're very, very expensive. Yep. Is it perchance a limited company you're dealing with?
No, it's not. It's a private individual.
If it's a private individual, it's harder. There is a thing with a limited company. It's not used very often. It's not always successful, but there is a thing called a garnishee order. It doesn't apply to you, where you don't get the money, but you can garnish it, which doesn't mean put a bit of lettuce on it, unfortunately, where you can garnish it, and it's an instruction given to the person's bank, and the bank, say he owes you £500, the bank will then garnish £500 of his cash, and the only people that can get that money are you, the holder of the order. But he has to give it you. So he can sit there. It's not allowed to earn interest. It's not allowed to grow. It's not allowed to diminish. He can't withdraw it. He can't do anything with it. He can't use it as an asset to borrow. It just sits there in the bank unless he gives it to you. If he doesn't give it to you, it stays in the bank.
Yeah.
But that only applies, as far as I'm aware, to limited companies.
Right.
All right, mate.
Okay, I just think people should know that, the courts, it could cost them more money for nothing, really.
Well, even if you're successful, if they don't pay you, yes, it costs you the money and you get nothing back.
Yeah, that's right. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, mate.
Okay,
good on you. 0161228 2255. How say you today? Perhaps the government should have gone to the small claims court, because in terms of the amount of money that Bradford and Bingley have cost, hey, that's small claims to them. Maybe Gordon Brown should invoke the power of the Kirk upon the markets, because he's a good religious boy, as you well know. Yesterday, by the way, was Come Back to Church Sunday. I didn't go. Did you? Just gone 1:20 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines with Mairead O'Kane.
The government's defending its move to nationalise the mortgages of Bradford and Bingley. The deposits are being bought by Spanish bank Santander. Environmental groups are welcoming Conservative plans to build a high-speed rail link between Manchester and London. The Tories want to scrap a third runway at Heathrow in favour of a line which would cut journey times to the capital to 80 minutes. 19 people who were kidnapped in the Egyptian desert 10 days ago have been freed unharmed. The group of European tourists and their Egyptian guides were being held in Sudan. Manchester's weather cool and breezy with occasional showers, highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Let's take a look firstly to the A57 Manchester Road in Warrington, down to a speed of 40 miles per hour in both directions between the M6 at junction 21 at Woolston and Woolston Grange Avenue. The council have introduced a temporary speed limit along Manchester Road. If you're using Peel Lane in Little Hulton, one lane's closed off because of roadworks and temporary traffic lights between Madamswood Road and Quarry Pond Road as well, in order to carry out repairs to the railway bridge. And don't forget, the tram stations at Piccadilly and Piccadilly Gardens are closed for the next 8 weeks whilst engineering works continue. Bury and Altrincham services run every 6 minutes, and between Eccles and Victoria every 12 minutes. And if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Carla Banks.
With more updates than the other guys.
2020 traffic.
A very good day to you. How are you? Telephone number today, 0161 228 2255. You can email via radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk, and the text number is 07786 206 951. David says, if the money spent on bailing out the financial institutions had not been spent, would that have meant we would have had more money to spread the Middle Eastern wars? If that's the case, I would say it's money well spent, and if that money would have been left to an incoming Tory government, I suspect it would have gone in tax relief to the wealthy. I presume the people who may have had their homes repossessed will now be able to negotiate a right to rent. As for your caller who said he was a Labour supporter but went on to crucify it, I have my doubts about his allegiances. Well, have your doubts, but frankly, just because you're a Labour supporter doesn't mean you have to throw yourself over the cliff like lemons when they do with their policies. I'm interested in the homes repossessed because, of course, what happens at the moment is if a building society or bank repossesses your home, it then puts it on the market for buttons, for absolute buttons, just auctions it off for whatever it can get. You're still liable as the mortgagee. You're still liable as a former householder, the bloke with the mortgage. I think that's mortgagee. But you're still liable for the money they don't make. So if you owe them 100,000 and they sell your house for 80,000, you still owe them 20,000, and that debt will be around for a very long time. And they chase you for it. Well, OK. But the other thing that happens is you've just had your house taken from you. You are homeless. You throw yourself on the local authority, which to all intents and purposes is a branch of government. And the government, via the local authority, if you have children, has to find you a home. They have to house you. Now, they may well put you in a bed and breakfast for some time, but they pay the bills. They have to accommodate you. Well, fine. Now, of course, if you're a customer of Northern Rock, or indeed a customer of Bradford and Bingley, particularly Bradford and Bingley, given that the good stuff's been sold off to Spain, perhaps we should have kept the good stuff and given them bloody Gibraltar if they're that desperate, but never mind. The good stuff's been sold off to Spain, and the crap's been retained by the government. So if the government now decides, under its bowler hat as Bradford and Bingley, if the government now decides to evict you, they will evict you from the house that they own, and then they'll have to accommodate you if you have children. Well, that's stupid. Why would anybody who has severe debts with Bradford and Bingley, why would they now bother paying? They might pay out of honour, but honour hasn't got them to pay thus far. Why would they bother? I'm not advocating the policy, but I'm pointing out it could be a consequence. You imagine you owe your building society 10 grand. They're just about to turf you out. Well, now it's the government. I don't have to go anywhere, because there's no point. The government will see before long. There's no point in evicting him and putting the house on the market, because we won't get the money back, ever. And we'll have to house him anyway. He might as well stay where he is. Extraordinary. Graham in Wigan. Hiya.
Oh, good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, sir.
Alan, I'm a natural Labour supporter, but like your earlier caller, pretty much disaffected by really the performance of this government for 10 years. And I'll tell you mainly why, because I think it's lost touch with its roots. You know, this government has progressively applied a regressive taxation policy against the low paid. And I think the result of this, well, if it hadn't have been for the easy credit that's been available, I think there would have been a recession long ago. And I think what's going to happen now, and I hope that I'm going to be wrong, is there's going to be quite a deep recession. So if I can just explain...
Please do.
The taxation policy, for example, this Labour government has been obsessed with maintaining its claim that we are a low-income tax policy. This is the headline tax, isn't it, the income tax? And it's remained low, and they've even cut it recently. But of course, as you mentioned earlier on, there's going to be a programme tonight about stealth taxes. By golly, we've been hit by stealth taxes. And these stealth taxes and other things conspire against the low paid. So, for example, council tax, they've transferred the burden from income tax to council tax over the years, and this drastically affects the low paid. they pay, in percentage terms, a much higher rate for council tax than other, well-paid people. And now, of course, we have the problem of high food prices. Food inflation is probably 5 times the headline inflation rate at the moment. And then we have power prices. Now, people are going to feel the pinch. There's no doubt about that. I think easy credit in the past has perhaps masked that difficulty. But now that there's a crunch on that now, I think people are really going to suffer. We had the debacle about the 10p tax rate being abandoned.
Yes.
And we had the situation where the low-paid people, someone say on minimum wage, were going to be asked to pay another £7 a week, so that the people on £50,000 a year could be better off in their tax cuts.
Quite, yes.
And we have this time and time again.
Well, okay.
And what I'm saying,
please
Alan,
do.
I think what's been stored up over the last few years is a recession, because it's that large chunk of people down at the bottom, and even going into your middle income levels as well. What's been stored up is the difficulty in that group, and people will no longer be able to afford to buy anything in the shops.
When you say you're a Labour supporter, I take it that you're a Labour supporter of the left, a social Labour supporter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, given that the Labour Party for 2 decades ran its elections on the basis of a left-wing manifesto, and not only didn't win elections, but never got a smell.
Yeah.
And it was only when Tony Blair came in and took them to the right from where they were, ditched the left-wing policies and got what you would describe, I suspect, Graham, as right-wing policies. Most people would describe as middle-of-the-road policies. It was only there that they found new voters.
Yeah.
And
Alan, sorry to interrupt you. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Well, I was going to go on. I mean, now that you understand what I'm saying, I'll just finish it for anyone that perhaps doesn't. But the only way the Labour Party can get elected is by courting the middle of the road voter, who is usually on what I'll describe as a middle class income, a middle income, Middle England. If you don't win Middle England, you don't win. Now that might be wicked, stupid, unjust and all the rest of it, but that's where the victory is. Had they not done that, had they stuck with what you would describe as honourable policies, others would describe as left-wing policies, you'd have had, instead of 10 years of Conservative government, you'd have had 20 years of Conservative government. Now here's the question, and it's one of those daft ones, but where do you think we would be now if we'd have carried on with the kind of policies that the then Conservative government were offering? Because that's the issue, not whether Labour or anyone else in power has made a balls of it, but whether we would have been in a bigger balls or a smaller balls if another party had had it, because that's what counts.
That's what counts, it does. And I'm not confident that really we'd be any better off, to be honest. If they'd have continued. Probably worse off even, I don't know. But all I'm saying is that, for a Labour government to almost they've almost penalised the people who they've got a natural support for. I mean, I quite accept what you're saying about the old Labour, where, you had excessive power of the trade unions and holding the country to ransom or whatever, and they couldn't continue like that, and they had to be reformed and to appeal to Middle England. But I think by appealing to Middle England, they've neglected, their core support, really.
But isn't that the right thing to do? You can either.
I don't think it is the right thing to do. Not when people, are being penalised, are finding it really tough with low incomes. I don't think it is.
I used a really childish analogy earlier. I said that Margaret Thatcher, in her government of a decade, released a man-eating tiger into the neighbourhood. Labour have done nothing to catch it. Nothing. That man-eating tiger is still out there. I'm talking, of course, about city bonus driven greed.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher released that man-eating tiger into the neighbourhood, and it's gone about its business doing what it does, which is harm the people. If you accept the analogy, Labour in power has done nothing to capture it.
Oh, no, it hasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question then, with my very, very childish and not that accurate analogy, the question then is, okay, so we've lost a few along the way because the man-eating tiger has lunched for a decade. But if we'd have stayed with the person who, or the government and the party that released the tiger, would they have taken it back into custody, or would they have released some more? I don't know.
I don't know, really.
But that's the issue.
Yeah, yeah.
We are where we are.
Yeah.
Would we be in a better place or a worse place if we'd have gone in a different direction?
Who knows?
Who indeed knows?
You know, we don't know. I don't
None
know.
of us. But it ain't comfy, is it?
It's not, no.
All right, mate, good on you.
Okay.
Graham, an old-fashioned, if he accepts that phrase, an old-fashioned Labour supporter, or if you prefer, a supporter of old-fashioned Labour, says he is disillusioned with the party because they've hit the working classes to rub up the sentiments of the middle classes. Is he right? And if he's right, were they wrong to do so? Or should they just had another decade in the wilderness? William in Stockport, are you?
Hello there.
Hello to you.
I'm listening like I normally do to your programme. A lot of people are coming on and saying that now the Bradford and Bingley has been nationalised, that the taxpayers have got the rubbish and the Bank of Santander have got the benefit.
Yeah.
Now, thinking of this is that if the Bank of Santander have acquired the savings of people, they're going to have to pay interest to those people. As an interest, whatever.
They've got to honour the interest contract.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the nationalised part, which is the mortgage side, is going to be money coming into the company.
Well,
you know, it's not such a bad deal.
It sounds like it's not such a bad deal until you recognise that the money coming into the company doesn't match and this is the reason they were facing going to the wall, doesn't match the money they needed to pay their bills every week. And I don't just mean the bills of running the organisation, but to pay their bills on the debt. Because Bradford and Bingley, like all banks, have some defaulters on their mortgage. Now, they do get the asset base of the property, one would presume, but the asset base is now worth considerably less than it was. A commercial company can't sit for the next 3 decades in the hope that the bricks and mortar asset base grows again. A government, of course, can. If it chooses to.
Just thought that the government were getting money in as opposed to Spanish bank paying it out on interest.
Well, the Spanish bank will be paying it out in interest, but only paying out the bit of the interest that they give to the customer. When a bank gives you interest, it doesn't lose on the deal; it makes on the deal because it
has got your money anyway.
Yeah, well, not just that. You give a bank £100, and at the end of the year, they give you £5 at the moment. But they, of course, have used that £100 to make 20 quid.
That's right.
So they give £5 to you, £5 to costs, £5 to bonuses, and £5 makes £1 billion profit for the shareholder. So you get your £5 and think, I've done awfully well because I've got some money off the bank. Have you beggarly? They've used your money to make 4 times the amount for themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So Santander won't be giving anything away, otherwise they wouldn't have took it on.
No, but they're giving the interest out, but only the interest, and they've got the savings as working capital.
Well, they've got the savings, but those people with that money would have got those payments anyway. However, had the bank gone to the wall, now, okay, it wouldn't go to the wall, but had the bank gone to the wall, then they wouldn't have got that money. So you're right in that respect, that Santander has now got a bigger cash asset base, for want of a better term, and the government now has the land asset base, but the land asset base, the bottom's fallen out of the market, and an awful lot of the people they've got, because remember, one of the things that Bradford and Bingley specialised in was the buy-to-let. Now, I know people who, only via the newspapers and via this job, but I know people who've walked away from hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt. They've just said, forget it, I'm off. There are landlords in Manchester City in the city centre who own 8 or 9 flats, and the second one they bought with a mortgage paid for by the rent from the first.
Yep.
And then they bought the third with the rent from the second, and they did that. And it only takes one in that chain to default, and the landlord's screwed and walks away from the lot, leaving all these properties owned by the banks but worth less than they lent out. And Bradford and Bingley specialised in that market.
This was highlighted last week in as much as the amount of flats that are empty in Manchester, and Manchester Corporation or whoever should take these on board as empty properties and fill them, you know.
Well, that is one of the things I mean, the buy-to-let market is better off than in some of the major city centres because there has been this housing boom. Now, you could say somebody owns these houses. Well, yes, they do, but unfortunately, the money they've used to buy them, whether it is the landlord or indeed whether it is the person who gave him the mortgage, the person who gave him the mortgage borrowed the money off somebody else. And off another bank, or indeed off their cash asset base.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of it goes deeper. Is that on the insurance side, where a lot of the insurance policies, etc., weren't making money? It's because some of the insurance companies wouldn't invest it other than in gilts or good things were solid. Not in the speculative market, you know.
But interestingly, all those people who've got gilts, there are, of course, government-guaranteed investments, as guaranteed as anything. They are the most secure investment.
Yeah.
One wonders what they look now as the government's chucking its money into big holes.
Exactly, that's it.
Good on you, William.
All right, thank you very much.
None of us understand the financial markets. It's good to know that the Chancellors of the Exchequer don't either. It's 20 to 2, and time. A little bit of news headline.
Gordon Brown's
with my radar, Kate, I'm sorry.
Gordon Brown's defending the decision to nationalise the mortgages which belong to Bradford and Bingley. The Prime Minister says economic stability comes first. Environmental groups are welcoming Conservative plans to build a high-speed rail link between Manchester and London. The Tories want to scrap a third runway at Heathrow to pay for it. And plans have been announced for an enormous tidal-powered energy farm in British waters. 3 sites are being looked at, 2 off the Scottish coast and 1 off Northern Ireland. Manchester's weather cool and breezy with occasional showers, highs of 15 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Don't forget that Metrolink have closed off 2 tram stations in the centre of Manchester, Piccadilly and Piccadilly Gardens. It's whilst engineering works take place on the tram tracks over the coming 8 weeks. Now, services will be run between Bury and Aldringham every 6 minutes and between Eccles and Victoria every 12 minutes. And, of course, there are shuttle buses which will run between Fairfield Street and Market Street every 10 minutes. Now to the roads, and if you're travelling around the Rochdale area, Oldham Road on the A671 northbound closed whilst gas maintenance work continues today between Wood Street and Milnrow Road. And in Cheadle, the A34 Kingsway down to 1 lane in both directions between Wilmslow Road and the M60 Junction 3. Again, whilst gas maintenance work continues. Don't forget, though, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester, Sports with Bill Rice.
The Lancashire all-rounder Andrew Flintoff and bowler James Anderson have both been included in England's 15-man party for this winter's Test Tour of India. Kevin Peterson will captain the side. Wicketkeeper Matt Pryor has been recalled, whilst Owe Shah is picked in the place of Ravi Bopara. The uncapped spinner Graham Swan has also made the cut. Lancs bowler Saj Mahmood has been named in the performance squad. Captain Stuart Law says he wants to stay at Lancashire next season and remain captain of the first team. The Red Rose sealed their Division 1 championship status on the last day of the season with an 8-wicket win over Somerset, and Law will have discussions with the club this week over a new contract.
Probably a bit wrong to captain 1 year and sort of stand aside, but I'd love to captain. It's been a privilege. It's been great on the field. Off the field's been a bit of a headache, but I now know what it's all about, and it's totally different to what it was in Queensland. I probably understand the role a lot better going into next year.
Manchester United's Gary Neville and Owen Hargreaves have been left out of the squad to face Aalborg in the group stage of the Champions League. The duo haven't travelled to Denmark with the rest of the party. Hargreaves is still sidelined with a knee injury, whilst Neville is still being eased back into first-team football. The United defender Patrice Evra is confident, though, that Dimitar Berbatov will soon start scoring goals. The The Bulgarian striker has yet to score since moving to Old Trafford a month ago.
Dimitri is a good player, but he needs adaptation. You know, it's the new team for him, but he do some little good touch. And let's feel what's happened when he get more game. You know.
The Manchester City youngster Ryan McGivern has missed out on a place in the Northern Ireland squad to face Slovenia and San Marino next month. The 18-year-old fullback is the only player from Nigel Worthington's previous squad to miss out this time round. Gary Megson has criticised the value of the FA's Respect campaign after a catalogue of refereeing errors in the Premier League over the weekend. Bolton were on the wrong end of a dubious penalty decision at Old Trafford, and Megson feels it's tough to respect the referees when they get decisions wrong.
At the end of the season, people are talking about players diving, feigning injury. Do we need technical help for the referees on making those kind of decisions? What do we come up with? We'll respect the referees. And then you get that kind of decision. It's very difficult to have any respect when that happens to you.
Rochdale youngster Will Buckley continues to take the headlines after a third goal in 3 games made him their top scorer so far this season. His boss Keith Hill can't believe the lack of goals his team have scored so far.
There's something wrong there when you consider the amount of opportunities that we create, that our leading goal scorer's got 3. I think if you dressed it down and you analysed the possession count and chances created out of all the games we've played so far, we should have somebody on 10 goals and sat at the top of the Sky Sports leading goal scorers chart.
The Leeds Rhinos could be without winger Lee Smith for Saturday's grand final against St Helens at Old Trafford. The player was placed on report for allegedly kicking the Wigan second rower Phil Bailey in the face during Friday's playoff victory. He'll face a suspension of up to 4 games if he's found guilty at tomorrow's disciplinary hearing. St Helens will lose their current strength and conditioning coach at the end of the season. Apollo Perolini is to leave Knowsley Road and head up an elite sporting academy in Dubai. The Widnes Vikings have signed St Helens forward Sam Thompson. The 21-year-old, who previously played academy rugby at Salford, has signed a 2-year deal.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
Sale Sharks are top of Rugby Union's Premiership. Can they continue their winning start to the season? On Wednesday night, we'll have full match commentary of their game at London Irish online at bbc.co.uk/Manchester from 7:45.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Hello once again. Just gone 1:45. Keith in Neston says the development and sale of the complicated financial instruments and toxic mortgages have been overseen by the directors of the various banks. Similarly, the trading of complicated financial products has been overseen by the directors of the various financial companies. These top-level managers should be named and shamed. In general, we only see the chief executive officers named, but we should see the names of all the executive and possibly even the non-executive directors so that we can avoid investing in companies or products in which these people have a position of authority and responsibility in the future. That's Keith in Neston. What do you say? 01612282255. Quite a long email, and I'm going to read it because I think it's interesting in more than one forum, as they say, in more than one way. I actually quite enjoyed reading it, but then wouldn't I? And it comes to us from Ricky, who says this: Alan, I just heard your opening piece this morning about Thatcher. There's something else to add to that viewpoint. Some time ago, you mentioned a certain Freddie Laker. Remember? Good. I was at British Airways at London Heathrow at the time. Do you know why he had to cease his operations? Freddie was the pioneer of cheap flights to New York, where the established carriages were charging a mint. Maggie was coming up to her second election, and on the theme of what you've been talking about in your opening address this morning, she needed to give the great British electorate a nice little earner, a bribe, so she wanted to privatise British Airways. But Lord King, the head of British Airways, told her that they could not compete with Laker Airways if privatised. So Maggie went and saw her good friend Ronald Reagan to ask a favour. She wanted him to do something about stopping Freddie. He, in turn, was trying to make a name for himself in the pages of history. That's Reagan, not Freddie, and was thus involved in talks with a certain Leonid Brezhnev regarding the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, SALT talks. But to make that name for himself, he needed Maggie's help. So a scenario developed. You scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. Ronnie, in turn, pressured a New York judge to rule against Freddie and thus his cheap flights operation, and in consequence, Laker Airways was shut down. Maggie endorsed her friend Roddy, and thus he made his name in history as Brezhnev signed the SALT Treaty. Now, she could go ahead and privatise British Airways and thus give the great British electorate a nice sweetener to re-elect her again. I wonder how many people are fully aware of this piece of Maggie's history, says Ricky. Well, I'm not sure that even historians would be aware of it in the way you flavour it. But there you go. Thank you very much for that. And Evelyn in Rill says, Alan, you're quite right about Maggie. We would have no NHS at all if the Tories had been re-elected. As you say, she mutilated our industries. Then there was so much unemployment, people were guided down the road of invalidity to keep the unemployment figures down. That leaves a lot of people who deserve the benefit being grouped with the unemployed. That's Evelyn in Rill. Well, of course, you're right on a number of counts. Invalidity benefit was, if you like, was used to get people off the unemployment register. But let's not condemn just the Tories for unemployment. Remember that poster, Labour isn't working. During the Labour government prior to Margaret Thatcher, unemployment was 1 million. And you'll be interested to know that the BBC has had it confirmed that Gary Glitter informed the authorities that he's planned to travel to Spain via France. Because he's on the sex offenders register, he had to let them know 7 days in advance of any plan. So the message goes out to France and Spain: lock up your daughters, particularly the young ones. Brian in Flixton, hi.
Hello, Alan.
Hello.
Yes. End of August this year, a certified bailiff came to my front door.
Yes.
He had an amount, it was scribbled on a piece of paper. It was a proper headed paper saying £283 for a parking offence committed the year before filed in near Blackpool.
Yep.
Apparently I'd overstepped the parking markings. I had paid the ticket, so I appealed against it and then forgot all about it. He said I had to pay £283 or his mate would clamp my car. He was there with the clamps on the street waiting to clamp it, so I paid it. Should I have done?
Did you owe the money?
I owed, well, no, not £283. It was £30. I think the original fine was £30.
Well,
I just wondered if he had the rights.
He is entitled to constrain goods. Whether that involves clamping the car, is too complicated for me to answer. Depends who owns the car.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was
the car. It was the car that...
No, it doesn't matter. If, for example, it was a company car, no, he couldn't. Because he can only constrain your goods. And he can constrain goods that are on plain view. So, yes, he could constrain the car in that way. To come back to, did you owe the £283? You said you appealed against it and then forgot it.
I appealed, never heard anything about it, assumed it had been cancelled.
Oh dear.
That was the honest. That's the honest answer.
Well, it would be a perfectly honest answer. Unfortunately, it butters no parsnips. If you don't pay a parking fine, it grows.
Yep.
It grows and it grows and it grows. And there is an obligation on you. Now, you might not like this and you might think it's unfair, but there is an obligation on you, if you appeal, to find out what the hell happened. Correct. At the appeal. Now, you should also have been notified by the authorities that you hadn't won your appeal, that the appeal had been rejected. That should have happened. So you could, even if they had, you say they did, if they had clamped your car, you could, I would recommend a lawyer to do this, but you could go to court and ask for the clamping and the decision and the bailiffs to all be overturned because you'd not received notification that the case had failed.
Right.
So you could have done all of that, but that would, of course, as I say, I wouldn't try and do that without a lawyer, but a lawyer wouldn't have much trouble doing it, but he'd want paying.
Yep.
And you wouldn't get that back. So it would be tricky.
Fine.
All right.
So he was fully entitled to do what he did. That's all I wanted to know.
Well, if ever you're faced with that again, say, it's not my car. Unfortunately, it may well be registered in your name. That makes it tricky, but bailiffs are only allowed access to your property with your permission. once you've given them permission, in other words, if you say, oh, hello, come in and have a cup of tea, who are you? I'm a bailiff, they're already in, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
You can't require them to leave. They can constrain goods which are on open site. They can't go breaking into safes and cupboards, but they can't break into your property. But if you let them in, they're allowed to take that which is on open site, and the only way you can stop them is by saying, that is not mine. I do not own that.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay?
That's
the
fine.
card, of course, is on open site. All right, mate.
Thank you.
Have a good day. 0161 228 2255. Evelyn in Rail. Oh, I've done that one. Sorry about that, Evelyn. I was going to boil your cabbages twice. I'm doing all vegetable references today, obviously.
What is it, my love? What ails thee?
Well, Dr. Sampson told Mrs. Merriweather that all the village is switching to digital TV forthwith.
I see.
And if one is 75 or over, or is an eligible disabled person, there is a switch-over help scheme to help you switch to digital TV for a possible small cost.
Then let it be so, Mrs. Bumble.
Oh, Mr. Bumble! Now for the other matter. Our youngest, Eliza, has just run off with a stable boy.
Oh, not again.
For more information, call the Switchover Help Scheme on 0800 40 85 900.
Yeah, very good day. 0161 228 2255. You want to sneak in at the last minute? You are more than welcome to try. The Taxpayers Alliance welcomes Osborne's decision, George Osborne's, Gideon if you prefer, as I always do, George Osborne's plan for a council tax freeze. The Conservatives at their meeting in Birmingham have said that if elected, they will freeze council tax for 2 years. This will cost, they say, £500 million in the first year and £1 billion in the second year. It's not quite as clear-cut as that, nothing ever is, but they say providing the councils can find savings. Well, councils can always find savings if they're told to do so. But there you are. So they welcome that. Whether you welcome it or not is a matter for you. From Roger in Prestwich, my gripe with shareholders of Bradford and Bingley, etc., whinging for compensation, shareholders take on risk with their eyes open and shouldn't get a penny till all the debts and contributions from taxpayers have been settled. I think that may turn out to be precisely what happens, but we shall have to wait and see. Because, of course, Santander, the owners of the Abbey, Santander have bought the investment side of the business, in other words, the deposit side of the business, and one would presume they'll have paid some money for that. Where that money goes, we'll have to see. M says, good morning, M, or even good afternoon, I think the bank should be nationalised if it would cost less than giving out job seekers allowance. This has to be weighed up sensibly, and the best thing for the country has to be done. OK, well, yes, the best thing for the country has to be done. Unfortunately, working out what the best thing for the country is very, very complicated because, of course, one political party will believe A to be the best thing for the country, whilst the other one will believe B, and the other one will believe C. And there isn't a universal best, because all actions you take, I think it was Isaac Newton that announced that to every action there is a reaction, to every positive action. In other words, if you push, there's somebody pushing the other way. So everything you do has benefits and consequences, and predicting the future is impossible. All you can ever do is calculate and then guess. You can't really do much else. So whether the course of action taken by this government, which is clearly you might think a different one that a Tory government would have taken, or a Liberal Democrat government, or BNP government for that matter, they would all have taken a different course of action. What we don't know is how those different courses would have affected what has gone on. And it's perfectly possible, if indeed what this government, I doubt it very much, but it's perfectly possible that whoever was in party would have done exactly what we're doing. That's what they'll say. This is what we've done. You would have done the same. Of course they would. But whether that's right, we'll have to wait and see. It's rather like if you drop a cat off the top of the building. They will all end up feet first, hitting the floor. It's the height of the building that depends whether they're dead or not. So they'll all do the same thing. But will you be doing it from the same stance? It's impossible to know. You just have to go with your gut feeling in the end with politics. There's not much else. There's no there's no definite right and wrong. The worst thing to do, in most circumstances, the worst thing to do is to react immediately. Usually, it's better to have a think. But sometimes doing nothing is the best outcome. It seems that the letter B is not very popular this week on the radio. We have Bradford and Bingley, who are being nationalised or going bust. And then the other Bs are being blamed for their downfall, Brown and Blair. I say, never mind what's happening in the world, sit back and listen to the other B, which is Beswick, and let the problems look after themselves. Very nice. Alfin Astley. All the A's, of course. Thank you very much indeed. And the B has been used to describe me previously, but perhaps not the one you're using. I think it rhymes with custard. How accurate is it? You must make it... Yes, I was once described as a large bird of prey. A bustard. See you tomorrow. Ta-ra.
The chopper has landed, and they've got no clothes on.
And is your job recession-proof?